Here we go. Okay, so just to remind you where we're at. We're on the Gemara Daf Hamud Bet and Daf Vav Aleph. The topic of our discussion right now, we've been talking most of the year about Tashbitu, getting rid of the chametz, whether it overcomes Yirאה by Yמצא, whether it's D'oraita, D'Rabbanan, whether getting rid of the B'dikat chametz, how we get rid of it, and whether you have to do bitul as well. We spent some time talking about what is chametz that you have to get rid of, and that we're going to come back to today. And that is at a certain point, is when the Isser Zman hits, does the chametz turn into a chayvetz of chametz or not? That was like the big question that we kept on exploring. But when it comes to the main Isser of Yirאה by Yמצא, so we noticed last week there were a couple of psukim. Those are the two psukim that are in front of you at the beginning. Shivat yamim seor lo yimatzeh bevatechem ki kol ochel machmetzet b'nichbeta nevashim mina yisrael beger v'zrach haaretz. Right, for 7 days you can't have sour door in your house. And there's another pasuk in Perek Yud Gimel that says matzot yachel shivat yamim. You have to eat matzah for 7 days. V'lo yirאה lecha chametz v'lo yirאה lecha seor b'chol gvulech. So if I ask you to quantify, how many parameters there are here in these two psukim, so I think you'd say there's 4. That's what I'm going to guess. Okay, I'm just going to make up that there's 4 parameters. One is the seor chametz divide, where we're going to say in the end there is no difference between seor and chametz, but the question is the content. Okay, that's one. The second thing is the so that's the content. The second thing is where. Right? Is it vatechem or gvulchem? Mm-hmm. Right? The third thing is
the verb.
The verb, right? Lo yimatzeh. Right? So you have vatechem versus gvulchem. You have lo yimatzeh versus
Yachel.
Well, no, that's matzot is yachel. Right?
Yireh.
Correct, Michael. Lo yimatzeh versus yirאה. What is the verb? You can't see it, or you can't have it in your property. Okay. All right, so again, so content, or chametz, where gvulin by, verb yמצא or yirאה, and 4, right?
Who owns it?
Correct. Lecha, right? Is it בעלות or not? Right? Lecha, right? The second pasuk it says lecha, lo yirאה lecha, chametz, lo yirאה lecha, so b'chol gvulecha, whereas the ownership, right, of pasuk Aleph. Of pasuk Yutet is batechem, right? It's not your ownership as much as in your reshut. So if last week we spent a lot of time talking about the scope, today we have to talk about the content. And these, obviously, the seor chametz thing we're gonna, ignore because that's a chemistry thing, and we don't really know how to do with that. The Gemara says hanu seor hanu chametz, so that's going to be less interesting to us. The gvulcha versus batecha we discussed somewhat last week, but this week I'm interested in the yמצא, right, versus yirאה, and the second thing is the lecha, right? So just to review the Gemara for a moment. So, and then we're going to emphasize a different part of the Gemara, but we'll just review the Gemara again, just because we should review the Gemara again. So the Gemara says, Tana Rabbanan, is on Hamud Bet, Shivat Yamim Seor Lo Yimatzeh Bevatechem, Ma Talmud Lomar. Why do you have to tell me that? Harlo Kvar Ne'amar, and I pointed out last week already. And again, 2 things I pointed out. I'm just trying to remind you of what we pointed out last week. One is the Gemara says, Harlo Kvar Ne'amar until later. The second thing is, you remember the Ram in Perek Dalet actually quotes the whole Shakla V'Tarya, which is odd. It rarely happens in the code. Hello, Farnemar, lo yirאה lecha seor lo yirאה lecha chametz v'chol gvulech. In other words, what do you have to tell me? So lo yimatzeh bevatechem, but you're not allowed to have it. Vishnamar lo yirאה lecha seor, since it says you're not allowed to see seor, shel chaya taroeh aval taroeh shel achem v'shel gavoah. Right? You cannot see your own, but you could see others or hegdesh. Open parentheses, hegdesh bedek habayit. Is that strong or less strong? We talked about that last week. Reb Chaim's thing, right? That when you give something to the bedek habayit, it's not yours anymore. When you give something to the mizbech, it's still yours, with a responsibility to donate it. So yachol yatmin, close parentheses, right? Yachol yatmin v'yakabel pi donot min hamachri. If you said you can see, right, shalachem v'shel gavoah, so maybe you could just hide your own, or you could get some sort of, you could borrow something from a nochri, or a nochri could leave something in your house and it would be okay. Talmud lomar lo yimatzeh, right? So yimatzeh means we can't have it in your property at all. This is the line the Gemara is going to switch at the end. This is only when a nachri where you don't have dominion over him. So he doesn't live with you. How do we know that a nachri, even if he's living with you, you can't have anything to do with his chametz? Again, it sounds like the opposite. Nachri not living with you should be easier to understand, but okay, the Gemara is going to change it. Talmud lomar lo yimatzeh bevatechem. I don't want it in your house at all. I don't care whether he's under your dominion or not under your dominion. Only Okay, so that teaches you even in outside of your house, in your pits, in your caves, whatever it is. I would only know in your house that you can't have it, you can't see it, you can't hide it, and you can't get, a guy can't leave stuff there. But maybe in Gvulin, maybe if it was somebody else's in your property but far away from you, that wouldn't be a problem. Nemar seor bebatim, i.e. seor la matzah bebatechem, or as it says seor, don't find in your house. Nemar seor begvulin, lo yireh lecha seor. Right, so it says seor in both pasukim. Mas seor amur batim, right, in pasuk in Perek Yud Bet, just like it says seor in Perek Yud Bet. Over mishum bal yireh ubal yimatzeh ubal yatmin ubal yikabel pigdonot min anochrim. All these different parameters. Af seor amur begvulin. Over mishum bal yireh ubal yimatzeh ubal yatmin ubal pigdonot min anochrim. Umas seor amur begvulin. Just like the seor in the gvulin, you can't see your own, but you can't see somebody else's or egg dishes. Then the Gemara continued, and it asked the question about the nachrisha kivashto or lo kivashto. Amar Mar, right? I would have known it's usher to look at, right? That you can have a nachri who walks in, right? Shalo kivashto, if you don't have dominion on it, right? But he doesn't live with you. How would I know that a nachri who you do have dominion over would be us? It would be mutter. The Gemara says, what do you mean? I mean, it's the exact opposite. A nachri you don't have dominion over should be less obvious, not more obvious. When the Gemara said, right, you can't see your own, but you can see somebody else's. That's what the Gemara said, Eli ela benachri shelo kivashto. That's only when a nachri who you don't have dominion over. But nachri shekivashto b'sharim chabachatzer. How do I know that I can even see chametz of a nachri who's living in my house? And when he's living in my house, he's under my dominion, and I'm still allowed to see his chametz. So he can still walk around carrying a sandwich, right? Your maid can have chametz in your house. Talmud lomar lo yimatzeh. So the Gemara says, what do you mean? That doesn't make sense. You're trying to tell me that a nachri lives in your house, it's not a problem, but you quoted lo yimatzeh. That sounds like a lo taseh. It's like not allowed to do something. Where it says mishum shene'amar lecha lecha trei zimni, or it didn't mean lo yimatzeh. It's right. It's the continuation of the pasuk, right? Because it says lecha twice. So right in the second pasuk, and it says lo yimatzeh in the first pasuk, but they really mean to say is lo yireh lecha chametz, lo yireh lecha seor, meaning if a nachri, even though it's under your dominion, it's not a problem. Okay, so in other words, they just quote a different pasuk. Amar Mar, one more thing. Right? So the end of the Braita says, if perhaps you could hide it or get something watched from the Nachrim, that would be okay. Therefore it says Lo Timatzeh. What do you mean? You don't need that thing. Right? You don't need Lo Yimatzeh to tell me that you can't have chametz. There it already says you can have chametz of somebody else's. Lo kasha. One source says you can't see somebody else's. One says you can't have somebody else's in your house. Mm-hmm. So how does that work? They say if you accept it upon yourself responsibility, that's going to be usher. Then it's not going to be usher. Okay. So that was the first Gemara. The question is, what happens lamaskana here? In the maskana, it's all a big mishmash. That's what I said last week, excuse me. That it's a big mess because in the end. We say, "Leten amor bezel, leten amor bezel." In other words, lo yimatzeh, lo yireh, going, not going. In other words, we don't know exactly what we hold. In the end, what we really don't know is what's the nature of the isser. So Rashi here, in the Rashi we quoted last time, right, says, "Lefisha amar lo yireh lecha." Rashi says, "Midichtiv lecha mashma mimcha mina shachai yatoreh val toreh shel begvurim shel acherim ki go nachri b'shel gavoa." Oh, that's what we did last time. Sorry. So the Rambam. We were up to last time, right? Just to reread the Rambam, right? There were two Rambams, right? We had the Rambam about Lav Shein Bo Ma'aser Yesh Bo Ma'aser. We had the Rambam about that quoted the Shakavatari, the Parah and Halacha Aleph. And the last thing we did was the machloka between the Gra and Rabbeinu David, right? That was what we got up to. So what does the Gra say? The Gra in the Shulchan Aruch says, Im lo machro, if you didn't sell the chametz, limid mi mashakatov avalator shel acher mishel gavoa. Right, you're allowed to see a non-Jew walking into your house with a thing, or you're allowed to see Hekdesh. Vayin Rashi Sham, Sheperu shel acherim. That's why I brought it above. Right. What does acherim mean? Eino Yehudi. Right. Rashi said, this is the source that I brought above, says, you can see it on the sheet, right? Higon nochri. In other words, if a non-Jew comes in to your house holding chametz, then you don't violate, right? Shalchai yatar. You're not allowed to see your own, but you can see someone else's, right? V'chein yireh b'kama mekomot mashma de b'shel Yisrael aser. It sounds like if another Jew came into your house, and I'm not talking about a meshubad or something like that. I'm talking about your friend walked in and you didn't remember it was Pesach. So, right, he comes in holding a sandwich. That would be okay. Right, Rashi says, that would be, sorry, not okay. That would be usher. That would be usher.
Because he's Jewish.
Because he's Jewish. Right?
Why?
So, why, right, in other words, Rashi says that, or the Gra takes in the name of Rashi, he says, it doesn't just mean acherim, it means acherim who are not Jewish. Right? Right? Well, Gavoa, right. No, it's according so we have to ask ourselves why. Just for contrast, Rabbeinu David on the left says, Masha Amru aval ataru eshel acherim b'shel Gavoa, af b'shel Yisrael ata yachol lema'et. In other words, it's even another Jew. You have to, right? So for Rabbeinu, so which one of these, let me ask you, which one makes more sense?
So look at Rabbeinu David.
Rabbeinu David, right? It's the Isser is Ba'alot, right? The Isser is you're not allowed to own something, but the moment, right, but you can see someone else's, who cares if it's another Jew's? Yeah. The question is, right? So what is Rashi saying here? So there's actually two dimensions to Rashi, right? When he says you can see another Jew's, you cannot see another Jew's also, even though it's not yours, right? So again, you could go down the line of Kol Yisrael Arevim Zelazen, whatever. I don't want to go down that direction. I want to talk in the terms of chametz umatzah. So let's say you limit it, you pigeonhole like the Gra does into the chametz of a goy. And based on things we've said in the past, like chametz being an Isser Zman, you might, right? When we said chametz is an Isser Zman, so what did we say? You remember we said it could be this object until X hour kicks in, is not chametz, right? You're open to the possibility that a chametz of a goy is not chametz, and a chametz of a Jew is chametz. Just like you have an Isser Zman, you have you have something that qualifies something as a chefza, right? The clock can qualify something as a chefza. Again, I know we said in the Beit HaMikdash it's always chametz, right? The clock can qualify as a chametz, or a non-Jew ownership, but a Jew ownership, you're going to have a much harder time saying that's not chametz for you, but it's chametz for him, right? You understand what I'm saying? Yeah. But for the right. So Avante wanted to say, like he said, maybe the difference between right his first gambit in terms of the difference between the Gra and Rabbeinu David is maybe the din of Shalchai of Vayra Bayimatze might be is it a din in the chefza or a din in the Ma'aseh Aveira? When you if you accept Rabbeinu David, there's the right, there's no problem with this thing, not because it's not chametz, it's just that it's not an avera klapei you, or it's the prohibition. What's the prohibition? No, the prohibition is to have chametz that's yours. This isn't yours, right? That's the second dimension of Rashi. But before we do that, let me try to demonstrate there's more evidence that it's not just the Yisr Zman that is mafkia the shem chayfetz, right? In other words, you understand what I mean by that? Yeah. Whereas it's not just that if it's the 13th, it's not chametz, and only the 14th, this chemical composition of water, yeast, and thyme, or water, flour, and thyme, becomes chametz. But it also might be who owns it. So there's a fabulous proof that Rav Lichtenstein brought, really fabulous. Actually, in the article, he doesn't even go as far as I think I'm about to go, so I don't want to say that he says this, but I'll tell you what he says, then I'll tell you what I say, and then I'll tell you what he says, okay? So there's a Gemara, a Mishnah, on Daf Memvav, that asks the following question. Okay? Pesach morning, second day of Pesach, okay? And you're making bread. You're making matzah, sorry. Okay? And then it becomes tameh. Okay, you're making a lot of matzah. You got all the guests coming over for the second day of Pesach, and it becomes tameh.
It's a terrible idea to begin with.
What, to start making matzah? But that's what do you mean? You have to make matzah. Like they didn't make modern matzah before. They made matzah at the Seder. Right? So as long as you're good, as long as you're fine, it's great. Okay, it becomes tameh. Now, why is that a problem? So it's not a problem. You can eat tamei matzah if you're a normal person like me and you, right? But there's something in the matzah that you can't eat. It has to be mafresh challah, right? Now, if you're mafresh challah, I can't. The Kohen's not allowed to eat it, right?
Okay.
So what am I supposed to do? Make it into matzah and then be mafresh challah, which he's not allowed to eat? So the Gemara asks what it is,
Wait,
right?
why is it different from matzah? Wait, start over.
What?
Was that what's the issue here?
So the issue here is, sorry, I said it on the second day. I'm going to go back to the first day. Okay, the first day is better. The first day is Yom Tov. Now, I can be mafresh truma or meiser. I can be mafresh challah on Yom Tov because it's ochel nefesh. Okay, but I can't be mafresh challah betuma because the Kohen's not going to eat it. I'm just being mafresh challah to throw it out.
Okay.
Right. So what am I supposed to do with this bread that I'm kneading here right now? I know it's tameh, so I can't be mafresh challah. If I can't be mafresh challah, then I'm not going to be able to eat it, which means I'm not allowed to cook it, which means the only thing is to just leave it.
Wait, you're not allowed to cook it because it's not ochel nefesh.
It's not ochel nefesh, and if I'm going to do that, then what's going to happen? It's going to become chameh. Right? Understand? We're heading down a path. In other words, we're in a moment where we can't head down this path anymore. Right? So that's exactly what the Gemara asks, or the Mishnah says. The Mishnah actually on Daf Mem Vav Amud Aleph. Keitzad mafreshin challah betuma b'yom tov. Where it's on Pesach. What the heck are you supposed to do? You need to be mafresh challah because you have enough dough there, etc. What are you supposed to do? So here there's two themes. There's two schools of thought. They break into three Tanaim. Okay, the first two, Rabbi Eliezer and Ben Betera, say Rabbi Eliezer says, "Lo tikra l'Hashem ad shete'acheh."
Wait a minute. Any Hashem?
Right. No, don't say this is the challah. It was usually we take off challah before we cook it. He says, make the whole thing, make it matzah, and then call this challah. And then
what's the problem?
Exactly. Nothing was.
I don't know anything about what you can talk about challah. Is that like how critical is doing it before?
Right. So that's the question. Can you actually do this? I know it's how critical. We do this b'di'evet, but he says in this case we're already in a b'di'evet situation. Exactly. Okay, no big deal. Right? Okay. You won't need a piece of matzah. Ben B'Teira Omer, take a piece of dough out, but don't let it be machmitz. Right? Just put it in cold water, and that'll stop the fermentation process. Okay, so they're basically both saying that we have a problem in front of us. Right? Mm-hmm. We have a problem. We have to avoid the problem either by being mafresh now, but don't let it be machmitz, or not calling it chametz. Okay, it's Rabbi Yeshua that's most interesting to me because of his language. I'm Rabbi Yeshua. Lo zehu chametz shemuzarin ala b'val yirah b'val yמצא. He says, this isn't the chametz that the Torah was talking about. Mm-hmm. Right? Ella mafrishtao menichita al'erev b'michmitza ichmitza. He says we can have something that has all the chemical properties of chametz, but it's just not chametz. It's not right. It's not aser. Now it's not because of time,
but it might be balut.
Right. It's not because of the time factor,
or because it's owned by a Kohen that's not here.
Yafeh. You're all saying the right thing, right? But again, it's
a flavor of hekdesh, basically.
I don't know if it's a flavor of hekdesh as much. We'll see that in a minute. We'll think about that in a minute, but.
It's not your problem. It becomes chametz. It's not yours. That's maybe what.
So right, yeah. But again, so there's two pieces of this. One is that it's not yours, but secondly, it's not chametz b'chefetz. I want to get to that first before I talk about the balut. I want to just say he's simply taken the Isser Zman and applied it not to Zman, but applied it to something else. Right? You understand what I'm saying? It's not that there's no ma'aseh averah. This isn't the chefetz of chametz. So it's chametz it can be Tuesday and it's not chametz, and it can be Pesach and it's not chametz because the Torah only said. And now, what did the Torah say? The Torah said you're chametz. Right? You have to have balut on this chametz. So if you if you adopt Rashi's position that it's again according to the Gra, right? That it's a goy's chametz. It's just not chametz. It could, it looks like chametz, it smells like chametz, but it's not chametz. Understand? Because it's the goy. It's mufka b'chefza from this. So here you have another example of it. Now Rashi here takes the second step, which you both took, right? Is the door open or did you leave the door open?
Yeah.
No, it's actually playing bottom. So Rashi says something that's a little strange. This is where Rav Lichtenstein went. He said, it's not yours. Right? Once you declared it, you said, this is challah. You're allowed to do that because, hey, I guess you're allowed to do that. And it's all also lo shelcha vercha. It's not the Kohen's, right? Because he doesn't want it. Right? It didn't get there, and actually, it's not going to ever get there because he can't even. It's not usable, right? So essentially, what Rashi's saying is that Rabbi Yeshua's definition, right? It could be the machlok between Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Lezer and Rabbi Betera is really about how do we view this chametz that's like in the middle. Right? In other words, if you want to disagree with Rabbi Yeshua, what could you say?
Based on Balut.
Right.
You can say if it's still in your possession, it can still chametz, but it's outside of your possession. In Rashi's opinion, according to Rabbi Yeshua, that it's not.
Right. No, it's in purgatory. It's not here. It's not there. Right. And that somehow is mafkia from the shem chametz. That's number one. Right. It's no longer a shem chametz. But more importantly, right. No, it's now when we're getting to the core of the issue of Yirah B'Yimatze. When we the real issue is Ba'alut. And the moment we can get it out of your Ba'alut, even if we don't get it into something, right? It sounds like from Rashi, or if it was actually going to get to the Kohen, then in fact,
it might still be your problem.
It might still be your problem, exactly.
But it's Tameh, it wouldn't be
because it's not going to ever get to the Kohen. The Kohen,
a regular piece of the challah that's not Tameh, you'd have a problem.
Correct. You'd have exactly.
So what would you do? You'd have to You'd have to bake it.
I guess you'd have to. According to Rabbi Yoshua, right?
Like the other people's opinion.
I guess you'd have to do something else, right? No, it's only because of this. Right? No, it's if it wasn't the.
No, regular challah.
No. Then you can bake it. Right? You bake it, make it to matzah. Right? Bake it to matzah. Exactly. Bake it into matzah. Exactly. That's what you would do. So these two sources, both the Gra and the Rashi there, and even the Gemara there, seem to indicate that the main. Now we're getting to our main issue here is that the main issue of Yirah B'Yimatze in the end, at the end of the Gemara, is Ba'alut, where it's do you own it, right? Where it's if you own it. Again, if you own it, as opposed to if it's in purgatory like this, Rashi has it, or if you own it, and again, if you accept Rabbeinu David for sure, right? If you own it, but if then you're chayav. But if a Jew owns it, and not only if a Jew owns it, if a goy owns it, not only if a goy owns it, even if a Jew owns it, you're not chayav, right? Rabbeinu David, those seem to all fit into this notion that ownership in the end is the main. What was the word used?
Kovea.
Right. It's the main koveh. It's the machayev, right? Of Yirah B'Yimatze. Which the lacha issue is going to be the primary factor. On the other hand, there is other evidence that talks about the matsui factor being the yimatze being the factor. In other words, again, if Rashi said here the lavdi dehu, right? In other words, I would underline those words, the lavdi dehu, right? I'm underlining them on my sheet right now, right? There is other evidence that it's not the D-Day factor, but it's the Matsui factor. And then, of course, what I'm interested in doing, once I demonstrate there is this Matsui factor that is the Machayev, then what I want to try to do is isolate them and say, well, what happens if we have one without the other? What would happen here?
Matsui is that it exists.
It exists in your space.
On campus.
On campus. Correct, on campus. So I'm going to... Not necessarily. That's what I'm going to try to... correct. I'm going to try my best to try to differentiate those two factors, okay? So for now, skip the Gemara on Daf Vav Amud Aleph. We'll come back to that in a minute. And let's take a look at the Rambam and the Ramban about a Jew. So this is the Rambam Halacha Bet, okay? Says the Rambam, it's having quoted the Shakla Bataria, the Rambam then says, Halamarata, I can conclude from the Gemara that in the end, Chametz Shel Yisrael, Iminicho B'Rshuto, Afilu Tamun. Okay, everybody agree with that? If you hide it, you're still going to be chayiv, right?
Yeah.
Afilu B'Yirah Cheret, everybody agree? Yeah. What about Afilu Mufkad B'Yad Goyim? Harei over Mishum B'Yirah B'Yimatze. What's Mufkad B'Yad Goyim mean?
You asked him, you're paying him to, or asked him to
right.
watch it.
Right. No, I gave it to him and said, "Can you watch this?" Or I'm paying him to watch it, or he's a socher for me. Right.
For your stuff.
Right, he's a shomer for my stuff. Okay, so it sounds like the Rambam is interested in Balut. Or
Yeah.
he's interested in it. It doesn't make a difference if you still own it. Ram doesn't differentiate between if the guy was Makabalach or Ayud or not, right? The Ramban is not so sure about this last case. If I rented it to a non-Jew, okay? He says, I was pretty convinced of this. We'll come back to this in a minute. We'll see the whole text in a few minutes. But he says, but he says, I found a mechilta that says, he starts off and says, I was pretty convinced about this other thing. And then I found this mechilta that says, Bebatechem lama ne'amar, lefisha ne'amar b'chol gvulecha, any place, shomani ukemashmo, Talmud lomar bebatechem. Why does it say batechem if it says b'chol gvulecha? I don't need to say that. Ma beitcha birshutcha, af gvulcha birshutcha. It has to be in your reshut. Yatzachem, so shall Yisrael shu birshut anachri. We have an explicit mechilta, says the Ramban, that says not like the Rambam. It says if you rent it to a non-Jew, right? By the way, this would solve enormous problems for us. We don't have to sell chametz anymore if you accept the Ramban.
You just put it.
You just rent it.
Renting
You just rent the chametz to the non-Jew, or just give it to ask him if you can watch this for a day, right? Can you or 8 days? Can you watch it for 7 days? So
You need both things. You need balut and bershutha.
So what is so? How do you explain the Rambam? It's what happens here, right? So first of all, we have to ask ourselves 2 questions in this question. In this, I'm going to try to go in order because otherwise I'm going to get confused. Also, there's a lot of parameters here. I'm aware of it. So let's ask ourselves first of all, what are my rights when I ask a non-Jew to watch something or anybody to watch something for me? What are my rights in the object? This is stuff we've studied before.
You as the owner?
Yeah, I'm the original owner. What rights do I have? Okay.
Responsible for replacement.
No. That's you're the watcher.
The other way.
Right.
Right.
If I lend you something, I lend you my car. What are my rights in my car right now? If I rent you my car, I lend it to you. Okay, fine. So, if you sell it, I get the money. Fair enough. So what about the parameters always are lahagdish, right? Can I sell it or can I be magdish?
Yeah.
Right? So the truth is that the Gemara never addresses that question. The Gemara only addresses, Rabbi Yochanan has the famous statement that, again, I know this was just because I sat around Rabbi Yochanan's share for, I don't know, whatever, however many years, 5, 6, 7 years. I'd say 7 years. And I think twice a year he would quote this. Like, it didn't make a difference what we were studying. Like, he found the way to introduce this. Like, this is really one of his favorite things. So what does Rabbi Yochanan say? He talks about, this is Gemara Meruba, it's very famous. Gazal velonit yashu ba'alim. The Gemara talks about, or Rabbi Yochanan talks about, if you steal something from me, and I still haven't done Yehush, shnehem yenei yechol lagdish. Zeh lefi she'eno shalo, v'zeh lefi she'eno b'reshuto. Right? It's
need both
it's in purgatory, right? Right. You need reshut and balut, right? What about that's if gazal? What about hifkid?
Yeah.
So there the Gemara actually doesn't talk about it. That's machloket between Tosfot and the Rambam. Tosfot says, right? Yesh koach la'adam magdish pikadon sheyesh lo biyad chavero. Okay, I just ran out of time before I found the Ravan who says no, you can't. Okay, I can be magdish something, or I can even sell it, ostensibly, right? I can sell something. Again, we understand the Gemara only talks about gazal. It doesn't talk about because geza, which again raises all sorts of questions. In the Gzela sugya, why in Gzela do you get more rights than in Pikadon?
You meaning
the
Gazlan.
The Gazlan, right? The Gazlan gets more rights in Gzela than but the Pikadon you also control.
No, I gave you my knowledge. I gave you that.
Yes.
You're on to it. Whereas the Gazal, I didn't give you any knowledge. You stole it. You're not giving up anything.
Yeah, so it's the opposite. If I give you something, if I ask you to,
you're somehow transferring something to the person watching it. You've given up something of your.
It's the opposite.
Why?
So, but there I'm still allowed to be magdish. I can be magdish.
The
original owner. On a loan I can be magdish, but in Gazlan you can't.
Right. Why? Because that person.
Because when it's consensual, then you, even as you're the watcher, you're the watcher, but you understand that part of the criteria is that I'm still going to do it. When the Gazlan, again, this is one possibility. When the Gazlan, he thinks he owns it, even though he doesn't.
He prevents you from doing any transfer.
Correct. There's kinyan exela, even without yesh. There's kinyan exela. Whereas in this case, the Torah has defined what the relationship is and allows me still to do that. Okay. Some of the other Rishonim disagree. So let's adopt Tosfot for a minute. If you accept Tosfot that I still have rights, then what would you say about Hifkid Etzla Nochrin? You'd say like the Rambam, that it's right, that I'm still violating Bal Yirah, Bal Yמצא. Right?
You still have Balut.
Right. If on the other hand you say that I no longer have the right to fight in the world of Gezel, then maybe you'd be more open to it. But that says that the whole thing is a mamonu thing. But maybe there's a unique din in Bal Yirah, Bal Yמצא. Right? So it could be this is all about Balut. That line would say this is all about ownership. Right? Who owns it? And if you adopt Tosfos's position that I still own it, then you're very much open to the Ramban's position that you're in the Rambam's camp, excuse me. You're in the Ram's camp that if Yifkid, and it's hard to explain the Ramban. Right? You with me?
Yeah.
On the other hand, right? So what would the Ramban say? The Ramban might say that there's a different din. What's the din? He says that
Changes the.
then it's not Matsui. Once it's in the Reshut of the Nachri, it's not Matsui in your house anymore.
It's impossible.
It's the machlok. What Rav wanted to say at the beginning was maybe this machlok is Ram and Ramban. The Ram holds the din of Bailut. The Ramban holds the din of Matsui. Right? Matsui means it's in your what did you call it before, on your campus. Right? It's true. It's Reshut Nachri, but it's still on your campus because right. Right? That's why it's out. Right? It's no longer Matsui. Yes, it's still yours, but it's Matsui. It's not Matsui anymore, and therefore you're patur. However, Rav Lichtenstein said it could be the Ram himself agrees that Matsui is a criteria here. As far-fetched as that sounds, how could the Rambam say that it's Matsui as well? Again, what happened? I'm being mafkid etzel goyim, right? And I'm still over Mishul Bal Yirah Bal Yמצא. So we said that's Balut.
Yeah.
What could you equally say? So look at the Rush here. The Rush has a long passage here, but he tries to explain the Rambam. And this is going to be, this will finalize this will kind of hammer in the notion of Matsui as opposed to Balut. This is an old debate, right? It says, starts off the Rush. It says, this is an old debate. The Gaonimu said that if a Jew gives his chametz to an Ochri, again, not sell it like we do, he just gives it to him to watch. Oh, Eitzel Yisrael Chaveiro, okay, or even to someone, another Jew. The kibel hanifkad alav achrayut, and he accepted achrayut. Hanifkad chayav bebiru v'lo hamafkid, right? The guy who has it right now. Aval pishu shelo. Kevan sheino b'rishuto, right? That sounds like Rabbi Yochanan in there, right? No, it's even though it's number one, number two has the responsibility to do biur because it's not a number one's reshut. Ve'aviu raya mimechalta. The tanihatam bebatechem. למה נאמר? לפי שנאמר בכל גבולך, שמר אני כפשוטו. תלמוד לומר בבתיכם, מה ביתך ברשותך, אף גבולך ברשותך. יצא חמצו של נוכרי ברשות ישראל, שהוא בביתו, ואינו יכול לבערו. In other words, if a non-Jew has chametz in your house, then you don't have to do it because you can't burn the non-Jew's chametz. It's going to kill you. יצא חמצו של ישראל ברשות נוכרי, שהוא שלו ואין ברשותו. In other words, a non-Jew's chametz in your house, you can't burn it because you can't touch his chametz. Your chametz in the non-Jew's house, right? You can't do it because it's not b'rshuta, right? So they wanted to say you're patur, right? Rabbeinu Yonah omer d'lolam b'rshuta mafkidu. V'chayav levaro min haTorah. Oh, Rabbeinu Yonah came along and said something remarkable. He said, when you give your chametz to the non-Jew, it's still in your reshut. That's an amazing statement. In other words, all the time we assume that when you give it to somebody else, it's no longer in your reshut. It might be still your balut, but it's not in your reshut. He said, even though you give it to him, it's still in your reshut. Right? Okay, don't worry, he doesn't understand this either. He says, I don't know what the heck that proof is. But Gam lo katav lefaresh ha-mechilta sheviu min harayis. He didn't explain the mechilta so well. But nearly, says the Rosh, this is the part that's important for us. The davar pashut hu, the af al pi shanifkad kibel lav achrayut. Even though the non-Jew, we're going to say it's the non-Jew, could be the Jew as well, but for the non-Jew, for our purposes now, it's the non-Jew. So again, I asked the non-Jew to watch it from you. I rented it to the non-Jew, or right, and he accepted upon himself responsibility for everything. Mikol makom ikara mamon shel ba'alim. Okay, so now you'd say it's still mine, right? If we stopped here, it would be fine. That's balut, right? It's the ikar mamon is ba'alim, but then he drops the bomb. You ready? V'kevan shehishilo hanifkad beivto l'shmirat mamono karina bebeito.
His house,
Whose house?
the original owner.
Correct. In other words, when I ask you to watch my car and you're putting in your garage, it's like you've given me the garage and the garage is my reshut. You understand? In other words, he expands the relationship between the mafkid and the nifkad, right? In other words,
Drop a get into that car.
No, then it doesn't work.
No,
It doesn't work. You understand? No, because it doesn't work. Oh, no, it doesn't. Oh, I see. But the wife's car, right? Correct. In other words, you understand? He says that basically it becomes reshut. And this is the ultimate proof that even, right, so if you say this in the Rambam, then you don't have to go down the run that the machloket between the Rambam and the Ramban is Ba'alut versus Matsui. It could be the Rambam's also on the Matsui, right? It's just, this is Matsui. Right, this is a case of Matsui, right? So then what you really have is this great dichotomy, whereas you have some sources, there's some evidence that points to the Machayev of Bal Yirah Matzeh is Ba'alut, right? That's what we said, at the beginning, right? That's probably Rabbeinu David's position, right? Ba'alut, and therefore, if a non-Jew walks to your house, and even if a Jew walks into your house, you have no responsibility to Bal Yirah Matzeh because it's not yours, right? And maybe Rashi could even, move into that camp a little. In other words, according to, right, maybe, right, in other words, Rashi starts off, look, if you look back at Rashi, he says, the lav didehu, it's not yours, right? In other words, it's true, the Gra pulls Rashi into the, just a non-Jew, but a Jew wouldn't be the case. But again, certainly Rabbeinu David, it's only Balut, right?
Whereas Maimon said both Balut and Reshut.
It could be both Balut, right? It could be both Balut and Reshut for sure, but
in this case saying, no, that is Reshut. That's not a case of one.
No, well, I'm sorry, you went too fast for me. Okay, so again, we have one source, we have one piece of evidence, which is Rabbeinu David. That is anytime someone walks into your house with chametz, Rabbeinu David says, not your problem.
It's not yours.
Not your problem. That seems to indicate the whole issue, right? There's definitely, Danny, what are you going to say? That's in your reshut, right? Yeah. He walks into, right, he's a bread salesman, he doesn't realize it's Pesach, and he comes in and he puts it down in your house. And you're not violating Bal Yirah Bal Matzeh according to Rabbeinu David, even if it's a Jew. It's in your reshut, doesn't make a difference. Right?
His idea of reshut is different, I guess.
So again, that's one direction. So it's Balut, right? That's one theme. And then you have this other theme, which is manifest in the Machloket between the Rambam and the Ramban about a non-Jew's asking a non-Jew to watch something for you, where the Ramban says that's good enough, and the Rambam says, no way, that that sounds like it's Matsui. And again, maybe even if we adopt the Russia's approach to the Rambam, then we can even say that the Rambam holds that it's a din of Matsui, right? It's just that the moment someone gives you is watching your car, they're also giving you their garage. And the moment that happens, so then it's Matsui, in other words, it's in your property. So the question is, could we possibly isolate these two? In other words, we've come up with case studies of each of them. Could we isolate Ba'alut below Reshut, or Reshut below Ba'alut, Matsui below Ba'alut, to be able to see which one is really the dominant factor? So there's a few ways to do this. I just want to say one side thing. There is an interesting chakira, which comes up in Rabbi Chanan Wasserman's Kovitz Shiurim, which I wanted to think about in this. It might be relevant to this discussion. So that's the Kovitz Shiurim here. He says as follows. Even in Trei Kra or the Sagi Bechad Kra, he says whether you need two psukim to teach you Hegdesh and non-Jew or just one pasuk. The Tama Machloket too. Okay, that we didn't look inside, but it's okay. Tama Machloket too. The Yesh Lefarish Miuta de Lechava Lo Shel Nachrim. Right, you're not allowed to see your chametz, but you can see non-Jews. B'shnei ofanim. You can see it in one of two ways. This is his chakira. Yesh Lama de Ptura de Nachri. This might sound like it's splitting hairs, but it might be relevant to our discussion. Or I think it's relevant to our discussion. You'll tell me. He says, why are you allowed to see a non-Jew's chametz? Again, when he walks into your house, he doesn't put this thing down, right? Yesh Lomar de Ptura de Nachri v'pnei she'eno shel Yisrael. V'v'lo v'pnei shehu Nachri. It's not because he's a non-Jew. It's just because it's not yours. Right? Or is it because it's not yours, or it's because it's his? That's his distinction, right? When he says, right? Yesh Lomar de Nachri v'pnei she'eno shel Yisrael. V'lo v'pnei shehu shel Nachri. Im ken en chuluk ben Nachri shel Gavoa. You wouldn't need two psukim, one for a non-Jew and one for Hegdish. Or yesh no the mikra lecha nafkinan yalfinan. Sorry, the shel nachri ptur b'beshu nachri. In other words, it's really because of that he's a non-Jew. But lo b'beshu eno shel Yisrael. It's not because it's not yours. V'chen shel gavoa patur b'beshu shel gavoa. Or it's each one. Or is it theirs or it's not yours? That's the distinction. Again, he uses it to explain why you might need two psukim, one for non-Jew and one for gavoa, one for Hegdish, or you can only use one pasuk. If it's because it's not yours, then we only need one pasuk. If it's because it's theirs, then you need two psukim. Okay, why might that be important for us? Well, think about the two psukim.
Hekdesh is still reshut. Not an extra pasuk.
No, I don't think you can argue Hekdesh is reshut.
Because you're part of the call that kind of benefits from Hekdesh. When it's a goy's, it's out of the Jewish world. When it's Hekdesh, it's in the Jewish world, but it's not yours. It's in Hekdesh. You need a pasuk to say it's not even in. Right.
I don't know if you have to go that far. I think just the very fact that you could have, or it's if it's an issue of Ba'alut, or this might be the difference between Balut and Matsui, or it's this distinction that he raises about non-Jews might be exactly the distinction between Balut and Matsui. Matsui, right? It's not Matsui, or if you need two psukim, right? Then it might be about your Balut.
Just getting it out of your Balut.
So I would say the opposite. I would say, but I think Misvara, if it's a din of Matsui, so it's not Matsui once it's out of, once it's Hegdishes or non-Jews. But if it's Balut, we need two psukim. One to teach you this is not your Balut for this, and one is it's not your Balut for that.
That's in Hegdish. You still have some kind of Balut. Right?
For potentially, even if I could say the non-Jews is not your Balut, but maybe Hegdish you do. But I would say the other way also. Even if you could say Hegdish, you might say the non-Jews is still connected to you. All right, I guess you're right. Non-Jews, you're right. Hegdish, because it comes from you, as opposed to a non-Jew where it doesn't come from you.
Isn't Hegdish, there's a communal aspect to it, and you're part of the community?
It depends which Hegdish, right? There's certain Hegdishes that you're not anything, right? Like if you give it to Bedek Abayit, it's not yours anymore, according to our Abayit.
And we still have the obligation of having Hegdish own comment. That's still at home.
Yes, right, correct. It's not, right, how can Hegdish own comments? I guess, right. I guess they're going to just sell it. And it bothered me last week also. I thought about it. I guess it has to do with just selling it. Okay, so we have one and the other. Okay, what's the obvious place to differentiate between something that is Ba'alut and not, Matsui and not Ba'alut?
Somebody gives you a pikadon.
Okay, so, but there you could say the moment they give you the pikadon, maybe...
It's not your Balut, it's in your reshut.
Okay, but maybe you could say it's not in your reshut, right? So, but there's a much easier case. I don't need to have somebody else, right? What if there's no other factor? What if it's just hefker? Right? Can I be mafkir something? So again, that's still matsui, but it's no longer balut, right? That would be the best ways. So we saw this Ramban once before, but we'll see it again. Right? The Ramban says, "Od yeshli safek," right? This is the andaftat. Behefkir. The fishi tzruchu begamara trey cry chad lagoy shelo kivashto v'chad lagoy shekivashto. Right? We need two psukim, one for a goy that's under your dominion, and one for a goy that's not under your dominion. Vilu hefker, lo mati minayu. The Gemara never even brings it, right? You might have noticed the Gemara didn't bring up hefker at all. The kevin the letle baalim. Since hefker doesn't have baalim, the lav da'acherimu, it's not bringing anything else's. Afal pi she'eino shelcha, even though it's not yours, eino bichlal heter zeh. That's one side of the chakira, right? In other words, he says,
you don't get the win.
Right, exactly. You don't get right. In other words, it's not diu matzi, right? And then he adds these words, right, which are interesting. He says diu matzi zachile benafshe tfei. Right, in other words, you have a greater access to it. You can get it quicker. V'tfei mi goy shekivashton. You can even get it better than a goy who's under your dominion. Then he says, but maybe not. V'gam zeh efshar shehu mutar. Maybe even if you're just mafkir it, it's fine. Lefi shematzati b'Yerushalmi lo yireh lecha. Eat tonight. There is a Tana that says, Tanu, lo yireh lecha shel chayya tareh v'tareh beplatya. You can see it in an open space. V'tanu tanya afilu beplatya, even in a bigger open space. Mandemar aval tareh beplatya. What's the case where you can see in a platya, which is one set of open spaces, right? A platya is like a plaza, right? Kishiv kuru kodem lebiuro v'chulei sugya mikom makom. Sorry. Right. Then he says, bitul hefker eino mitkabel b'chol hasugyot halalu. He says, but just being mafkir, just doing bitul, that wouldn't qualify as hefker, right? That's already in the bitul sugya. That's not relevant to us. But he says, when it comes to hefker, I'm not sure, because he has two tzadim in hefker. Now, what is hefker? Again, according to me, hefker is Matsui b'li ba'alut, right? And the Ramban has two positions where that could be. So this could be actually a full expression of what I'm trying to say. In other words, we have some sources that say the machayev b'ayuay matzeh is ba'alut. You have some that say it's Matsui. You're right. The cases of the goy, when you leave it by the goy, that's a test case. But here, hefker is a classic test case, so I don't even need the other side. I just have my own thing, right? Or you could say maybe hefker is not as good a compelling thing because hefker, it's true that it's no ba'alut, but I'm still closer to it, right? So maybe it's not a great indicator. And finally, one other case we talked about. Until now, we talked about if I take the Machlokes Ramban is if I take my chametz and I give it to a goy someplace else, right? I ask you to watch. What about the flip side? What if a goy gives me chametz and asks me to watch it? Right? That should also be matsui, bli ba'alut. Right? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So what do we say in that case? So here, this is Gemara. This is the next Gemara. This is on top of the Rambam and right underneath the Rashi. Tana Rabbanan. Now I know I put this here instead of there. Okay. So this is, again, this should be at the bottom of the first page, maybe. I don't know exactly where it is. Yeah, the bottom of the first page. Okay, so Tana Rabbanan. Okay, so Nachri comes in carrying his falafel. If he asks you to watch it, zakuk levayer. Okay? Yiched lo bayit. If you gave him a bayit, doesn't mean a house, it means a room. You gave him a room in your house, ein zakuk levayer. Okay, so we have three halachot here. If he walks in carrying a sandwich, you don't have to do anything. Right? If he asks you to watch it, you have to do it. But if you gave him a house, ein zakuk levayer. A room. So if you gave him a room, ein zakuk levayer, right? I know, you're going to tell me this is exactly the garage case that we talked about before. Hold off. Then the Gemara says a fourth clause. Shenemar lo yimatzeh. It says lo yimatzeh. Okay? So now, the Gemara says, my kamar, what's this fourth clause? What is that going on? Case 1, case 2, or case 3? The pita, the watch my thing, or the yiched lo yibayit, right? Give me a room. Which one does lo yimatzeh prove is okay? So Amar Papa, arei shakai, v'achi kamar. It goes on not on the pita case, but on the if you're watching it for him. Hifkidu etzlo zakuk levayer. Shneimar lo yimatzeh. Okay, so that's Rav Papa. Right, you understand? If you ask you to watch it, lo yimatzeh. Amar Rav Ashi Amar lo lama seifakai. In the case of yiched lo bayit ain't no zakuk levayer because it says lo yimatzeh and only lo yimatzeh, but not yiched lo bayit. So everybody sees where this is going, right? So vachi kamar. Yiched lo bayit. If you gave him a room to, right? You gave him the garage and said, keep your car in my garage, keep your chametz in my machsan. Ain't zakuk levarer. Shene'emar lo yimatzeh bevatechem. It can't be in your house. V'ha lavdi dehu. Right? Or it's batechem. The garage is no longer around because you were miyachel lo bayit. Okay. And sorry, I didn't finish. The nachri ki kamayim. When the nachri puts his chametz in the garage, the beit the nafshei kamayim. He's putting it in his house, right? You follow? So yet so far, this sounds like a din of matsui, right? You with me? This is total matsui. Then the Gemara says, the mayor, the schirus kanyo, if you yiched lo bayit, if I gave him the garage and I said you'll pay him to rent the garage, and that's his house. That's now we have a Gemara of Avodah Zarah. Again, maybe we'll come back to this, maybe not. But af makom she'amru lehaskir, right? We don't like this so much, right? Generally, the Gemara says you're not allowed to rent houses to non-Jews in Eretz Yisrael. But there are some exceptions. You're allowed to do it. But you're allowed to skir. Lola beit dira amru. You're not allowed to give him a place to live. Right? V'isa, right?
Why is it the Eretz Yisrael?
What? I have to check that again. Okay, I'm pretty sure it's Eretz Yisrael, but I'm not sure. He says you're not allowed to rent it because what's going to happen? He's going to put it in Avodah Zarah. Says the Gemara. Wait a second. Can a non-Jew bring right? That's not your problem. Wait, if he actually is kona the garage, when I give him the garage, it's his place, right? So, it's not your problem. So the Gemara says, Shani Hacha, you're right. In general, he's not Koneh. Right?
Mm-hmm.
But Shani Hacha, Da'afki Rachmana b'Lashon Lo Yimatze. Here's where I get the Matsui from. Right? The Torah told you Lo Yimatze.
What is wrong?
No. Chametz. Chametz is really, you're not going to the house. Right? That is, right? So why, if I gave the non-Jew my garage, I put it in his garage. That was the case we talked about before. Now we're talking about the non-Jew brought into my garage. Why is, right? Ein zakuk levaer, right? Ta'afki rachmana b'lashon lo yimatzeh. Ma shematzui biyadcha, yatza zeh she'eino matzui biyadcha. Whoa. So it seems like this Gemara is exactly our Hakira. Right? In other words, what? What does the Gemara say in the end? It needs to be Matsui. And this isn't Matsui. It's true, it's not his garage.
But you can't have access to
But
it.
I don't have, it's not considered in the whatever parameters we're going to define of Matsui.
Because you don't have access.
I guess. Right? I don't have access to it. And because I don't have access, because I said, put your chametz here. That's words. Ironically, then what emerges from this Gemara is something amazing. I could be mafkir the chametz.
Yeah.
And and according to Ramban, on one side I can still be chayav, but I can give you a house, my room, with the chametz, or I can give you my room, right? I wonder what he would say, right? If I have my chametz in the room, and I leave my goats, I rent out the room, I can actually not have to do, right? Because Matsui is, so here I've been able to, so here the Gemara is very clear, and I'm able to actually create a gap between Matsui and Ba'alut. This is not Ba'alut, at least Ba'alut in Kol HaTorah Kula, right? It's not Ba'alut of Hoshen Mishpat, and yet I'm still, right, and sorry. It is Balut. Sorry, it is Balut, and yet, but I'm not responsible, and therefore I'm right. Exactly, I'm not Matsui, and then I'm still going to be Chayav. I'm not Chayav. Correct. Right. Correct. So the question is, how far does this go? This is Machlokas Rishonim. How far this goes? Is this really true? Right. So look at the Ramban. This is the last source on the page. Running out of time. Now let's just start with Rabbeinu Tam. Right? Rabbeinu Tam says, Perish Rabbeinu Tam. This is the Tosafot, the second last source on the page. Perish Rabbeinu Tam. Da'afilu ba'achrayut ma'iri. We're talking about where Yiched lo bayit. Right? This is the Tosafot Psachim Daf Vav, right? He quotes Rashi first. Then he says, Afilu ba'achrayut ma'iri. Where it's Umishum achi mafik mi lo yimatzeh de lo chashiv matsui kevan sheyichid lo bayit. Rav Papa idle misvar kevan sheyichid lo bayit havi ki'ilu kibel alav achrayut al chemtzo shel nochri bebeito shel nochri. What's he saying? 1 second. The last time I'm not sure what he's saying right now, but he seems to say that it's with achrayut, meaning who has achrayut? When I gave the non-Jew the garage. No. It's not the non-Jew the garage. Sorry, it's the other way around. I said you can leave the right. This is the key. This is the important for me. When the non-Jew left the stuff in my house, he left the chametz in my house, and I said you can leave it in this room. And we're saying now I gave him the room. It's even when I'm mekabel achrayut on the chametz. I say if the chametz burns down, Jeff, I'll pay you back. Wow. So it's super balut without Matsui. You understand? You might have said, right, I have, right, it's not mine. But what if I mekabel achrayut? Well, then it's partly mine. Right. I'm insuring the Nachri's thing, and it's still right, not responsible. The Ramban doesn't like this, I think, right? And at the end he says, 1 second. Because because mishum deschirut kanya, avle beito shel goy, v'chemtzo shel goy b'rshut hagoy. Afal b'shekibel alav achrayut ein zakuk lo, yifkidu etzlo. Dafka. Kach b'reinish Rabbeinu Tam. Chen katav Ravad. U'kameduim hayinu. And he says originally when I was reading this sugya, shelo nemru dvarim elo b'chemtzo shel goy. I thought this was only talking about the chametz of a goy. This is the part that I told you before. That's when I give the goy the reshut, right? The chametz. Avaleno Bershuto, Yatzachem Social Nachrishu Bershuto Shel Yisrael. V'chamtza shenafal b'bolet. Afal pishu Bershuto, Avaleno Yachol Levaro. Lamadnu mikan, so that's the Mechilta. Shedin Chemtzo Shel Yisrael Atzmo, Kedin Chemtzo Shel Nachrish Shekibal Alav Achrayut. What does that mean? In words, he says, I originally thought like Rabbeinu Tam, but then I read the Mechilta, and then I came to the conclusion that Chemtzo Shel Yisrael Atzmo, my chametz, is like a goy's chametz that I accepted achrayut. It's not if I accept achrayut. But tarvayu b'reshut Yisrael over b'reshut goy ain't over. The batechem ktiv. I read it wrong. What does he say? The Ramban disagrees with Tosfot. He says if the goy brings the chametz into your reshut, then it's a din of Matsui. It's not a din of Balut. And the moment it's Matsui, you're chayav. But I don't agree with Tosfot. I can't accept the fact that once you're Makabal Achrayut, you'd still be Patur. Once you're Makabal, sorry. So it's not a din of Matsui. 1 second. Sorry. The opposite. Bershut Yisrael over. Bershut Agoyin over.
It's not about Balut, it's about Matsui.
No, he says, Din Chemtzo Shel Yisrael Atzmo, Kedin Chametz Shel Nachri Shekibal Alav Achrayut. But if I have my own Chametz in my own property, I'm chayav. If a Nachri gives me Chametz, and it's in my property, I'm also chayav. I don't care if Yiched Lo Bayit. The moment I'm Tosfot said, even if Makabal Achrayut. Tosfot is the ultimate expression. Sorry, let me just organize again. Tosfot says, again, what happened here? You had Christopher come, he comes to your house, he says, I want to leave my Chametz here. You say, put it in the garage. Okay? According to Tosfot says, I say, even if I say, no problem, I'll insure it. Right? I'm still patur. The Ramban says, not possible. He says, the moment you insure it, the moment you're Makabal Achrayut, then it's yours. It's like your Chametz. And the moment it's like your Chametz, right? Then you're obviously Valim Bali Rabbi Matzeh. That's what the Ramban says. Okay, sorry, I didn't read it well in the thing. So, what's the machloket? Is it Balut or Matsui? Or it's, if you believe that, right, that even if I own it, or if I accept the insurance policy, since I gave him that space, that's the we had to add. That's what I was listening before. Once I gave him that space, it's no longer considered Matsui anymore. And Tosfos comes from a position of Matsui, and because it's Matsui, right, I'm butter. The Ramban says no. Right, no, he says even farther. He says it's an issue of balut. He says that chametz is like your chametz. That's what he says. The moment you bought an insurance policy, it's like your chametz, right. And therefore, and it doesn't even make a difference if it's matsui. You have balut on it. So he says you have balut on your chametz, and you have an insurance policy on that chametz, which basically means you have balut as well. Okay, so the bottom line is that we have evidence lakan, right? The evidence lakan is the chametz and the others space, and the mechilta, the Ramban, the Machogat, the Gra, and the Rabbeinu David. And then we have a couple of ways, right? Hefker is a way to measure whether it's matsui or balut. And then you have this machogat, if yiched lo bayi, right? If I give him a place and a makabel al achrayut, that's a machogat also from the Ramban, right? That's again, we're going to just make sure you have the qualifications, right? Yiched lo bayi, so that eliminates the matsui problem, but kibal al achrayut, that lights up, right? It ignites the balut issue. Tosfot, I don't care. Ramban, what are you talking about? That's like your chametz, right?
So
Ramban balut
system all balut.
So the Ramban says, right? He believes that the issue is balut.
That's like Chemtzo Shel Yisrael Bershut Nachri. That is a case of balut, but not Matsui.
Chemtzo Shel Yisrael Bershut Nachri.
You still have balut, but you don't have Matsui.
So he doesn't. Again, that's exactly what did he say above? Ramban. I'm also trying to keep it all the positions.
It's not a consistent thing. It's only.
It might. 1 second. He says, "Yatzach Chemtzo Shel Yisrael Shehu Bershut Nachri," because then you're saying that should be an issue of.
It's consistent of just balut. That is just.
You're right. You're right.
The Rambam is not exactly. It's not a classic only balut only Matsui.
Right. There has to be it has to be both. Right. In this Ramban, you're right.
They each come up with cases where you are patur when one of them is missing.
No, but the Ramban bases it on this. How could the Ramban not be consistent? 1 second. He based it on that machilta. This line is based on that machilta. In other words, that passage that I quoted above is also in this passage here.
Right.
1 second.
Over. That's
what he says. He says I used to be in Tosfos' camp. It was all about Matsui, And then I saw this thing, but you're right. Before I explained the Ramban as being a Matsui issue. Okay, I have to think about that. Okay, even if I don't have a consistent reading of the Ramban,
Right?
it must be both. That's what you're saying.
Is it? I'm asking.
In the halacha l'maisa, we pass in both. Yeah, we pass
in any case where you can get rid of one, so you can't put it by a goy and just leave it with them.
No,
if you don't sell.
that's why we sell it.
You're saying you need both to
Yes, to be potter from by. That's why we sell it. Yes, correct. Okay, you're right that I have a problem when I read the Ramban. I think about that. But again, the main theme I think is very clear. These are the two main themes in the halacha l'maisa. Once you get out of the Gemara, because the Gemara doesn't talk about all the parameters. Once you get into this, again, it all comes back to the different parameters that we have in the Gemara. Okay, so we'll stop here.
And the other idea here is maybe the whole idea of balut, not the same din and mamon.
So that came up. We just saw that. But if it doesn't, if he says once it's not balut din and mamon, then what is it?
So maybe there's a unique
category of he says Talmud Lomar lo Yמצא. That's why I'm putting it into the category of lo Yמצא. You could say that's a variation on. It's a different type of balut. You could also go that direction if you wanted to. Okay.
The angle.
Right.
Maybe a different category.
Altogether, right? Who said that criteria has to be applied here? Okay, so that's Yמצא, Matsui, and Balut, and we'll continue next time. Not sure exactly where we'll go, but we'll see. Okay, thank you.